call the meeting of the Minot City Council to order for today, Monday, March 21st, 2022. It is 5:30 in the afternoon. I would ask for folks both in the audience and here at the dais to go ahead and put your electronic devices on vibrate or on silent. We'll keep the distractions and interruptions down to a minimum. Roll call, please.
Evans. Here. Janser.
Here.
Olson. Here. Pittner.
Here.
Rajagula. Here. Ross.
Here.
Sitma.
Here. Number 2 is Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Number 3 on our agenda this afternoon are mayoral appointments. We do have 2 for consideration. Vicki Summerfield to replace Mike Reistad on the Minot Commission on Aging Board of Directors with a term to expire on March of 2025, and then Caitlin Albers to replace Jay Walland on the Minot Housing Authority Board Commissioners, set term to expire December 2026.
Move approval.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson, second by Alderman Ross. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Final call for discussion on the motion to approve. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson.
Yes.
Pittner.
Yes.
Rajagula.
Yes.
Ross.
Yes.
Sitma.
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Number 4 is our city manager's report.
I've included the memo in the council packet available for council and public. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Any questions for our city manager on his report? Alderman Patagula.
Just a comment. I'm really glad to see that you're continuing with your continuing education and certification, both with the city manager role and also in terms of incident command system. So that's a very good role model for other city staff. I'm glad to see you're doing that actively.
Great, I appreciate that. Thank you. If the council doesn't mind, we've had a recent change in how we've been handling bid openings, and I'd like to invite the city engineer up to give an update to the council and the public on that, since last week we did our first virtual bid opening as a city.
Good afternoon, Mr. Meyer.
As the city manager had stated last week, we did our first V-bid or virtual bid opening here at the city of Minot. This isn't anything that's earth-shattering or anything like that. The DOT's been doing this for about 10 years. Other cities have been slowly adopting this through an online bid network called Quest. That's where pretty much all of our bidders get bid announcements and information these days. And so the way that this works is we advertise the plans on Quest and in the Minot Daily like we have for many, many years. But now we have an option where the contractors, when they submit their bid, instead of the paper envelope being mailed to Minot, they upload their license, their bonds, their insurance, and their actual bid online. And when they input all their bid numbers, it calculates their unit prices for them. It calculates what their bid is, and then as we go through the process, we check their bonds and their contractor's license. If that's all good, like just like we would in a setting here, we open their bid virtually, we hit the button, and displays who the lowest bidder is right away. And so it's been a great tool for us to use so far. It has saved hours and hours of work clerically after we open up these bids to tabulate and get you something to approve. So just one of the several implementations we're trying to do to get us more in the 21st century, and I think this is a great asset to the city of Minot. Be happy to take any questions you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Meyer at this time? Perhaps maybe one. Was there any consternation from any of the folks that were submitting bids on, I guess, the process?
Mr. Mayor, no, none have stated any. There was, I think, 1 or 2 that have never done the V-bidding through Quest. They've done it through the DOT or others. But the nice thing is if contractors have questions, they can call Quest. They're great people to work with. They set the contractors up, and we had no issues with it whatsoever.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome.
Mr. City Manager.
Nothing further.
All right. Moving on then to number 5, this is considered the report of the Planning Commission. We did have 3 public hearings. We'll take the public hearings first. 5.1 is public hearing request on an application from Melissa Wright representing Harmony Heights LLC and Orma LLC owners for a zoning map amendment from M1 Light Industrial to CBD Central Business District and future land use map amendment from the industrial to downtown mixed use for the purpose of qualifying for a facade improvement grant, which is limited to those properties in the CBD Central Business District. The legal descriptions for the properties are Lot 1, Baker's rearrangement of portions of Lots 1, 2, 3, 11, 12, Block 30, first addition to the City of Minot, and Lot 2, Baker's rearrangement of the portions of Lots 1, 2, 3, 11, and 12, Block 30, first addition to the City of Minot. The addresses for the properties are 12 3rd Street Southeast and 212 East Central Avenue. The recommendations to the council is as follows. Resolution 3751 to amend the future land use map for the subject properties from industrial downtown mixed use, and 2, an ordinance on the first reading for a zoning map amendment from M1 Light Industrial to CBD Central Business District. Again, this is a public hearing for anyone to come forward and speak either in favor, in opposition, or neutral to the recommendations that are before us. One more call for public comment for the public hearing. Seeing none, what are the wishes of council? Alderman Janser.
Mr. Mayor, I move we close the public hearing and approve this item.
Motion by Alderman Janser to close the public hearing and approve the item as recommended. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Ross. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Motion is to approve the 2 recommendations. Please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Motion is approved. 5.2 is another public hearing, a public hearing request on an application from Harold Stewart, City Manager, on behalf of the City of Minot for a text amendment to the Land Development Ordinance of the City of Minot. The proposed changes are the product of the city's annual cleanup ordinances and primarily focus on adding clarification language to bolster the respective sections' original intent. The recommendations to the council was to approve an ordinance on first reading for a text amendment in line with the Planning Commission's recommendations. Again, this is a public hearing for anyone to come forward and speak either in favor, in opposition, or neutral to the recommendations to council. One more call for comment on this public hearing. Seeing none, what are the wishes of council? Alderman Pittner.
Mayor, I move that we close public hearing and approve the item with recommendations from staff.
Motion by Alderman Pittner to close the public hearing and approve the recommendations of staff. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Janser. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Motion is to approve the item. Please call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Motion is approved. 5.3 is another public hearing request on an application by Project B, applicant on behalf of the City of Minot, owner for a zoning map amendment from C2 General Commercial to C2 General Commercial and a PUD overlay planned unit development. The purpose for this is request surrounds a mixed-use housing for homeless and low to moderate income families, a commercial restaurant, office space, and space for congregate meals. The legal description for the property is outlots 4, 6, and 7, southwest quarter of the southwest quarter, less parcel 1 through 7A of Section 25, Township 155 North, Range 83 West. The property is located at 1901 South Broadway. The recommendations to council was to approve an ordinance on first reading for a zoning map amendment from C2 General Commercial to C2 General Commercial with a PUD overlay planned unit development. Again, this is an opportunity for anyone to come forward and speak either in favor, in opposition, or neutral to the recommendations before council. One more call for comment on this public hearing. Seeing none, what are the wishes of council? Alderwoman Evans.
I move we close the public hearing and approve the ordinance on first reading.
Motion to close the public hearing and approve the recommendations. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Olson. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve the recommendations. Please call the roll.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes. Motion is approved. We have two remaining items on the Planning Commission. We can either take these individually or together. I would look to the council for its direction on which it chooses. Alderman Pittner.
Mayor, move approval on the remaining items.
Motion to approve the two remaining items with the direction from recommendations of the Planning Commission. Is there a second? Second by Alderman Janser. For anyone in the public, both these items will be approved with the recommendations from Planning Commission unless someone needs to have one of them taken individually for individual consideration. Seeing none, any discussion on the motion to approve both items as recommended by the Planning Commission? Second call for discussion. Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve both 5.4 and 5.5 with the recommendations of the Planning Commission. Please call the roll.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to our next section of our agenda this afternoon, consent items. There were 20 different items on our agenda. Number 19 has been pulled from the agenda this evening, so 6.1 through 6.18 and 6.20. All of these items are to be passed with the recommendations from staff unless any one item needs to be pulled for individual discussion. Is there anyone in the audience that needs an item pulled for individual consideration? If not, I would look to the council.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Ross.
I move approval of the remaining items.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Ross to approve the remaining items as recommended by staff, second by Alderman Pittner. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Last call for discussion. Motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to 7.1. These are the action items for this afternoon. The first is Landrum and Brown Statement of Work. Landrum and Brown, Inc. is a skilled consulting firm with many years' experience in the aviation industry. Its previous work with Minot International Airport affords its invaluable information about the operation and history. City of Minot currently has a master service agreement with Landrum and Brown, Inc., which commenced on April 1st, 2021, and is set to expire March 31st of 2023. The recommendations to council is first recommendation to approve the 2022 statement of work with Landrum and Brown, to approve the budget amendment, and 3, authorize the mayor to sign the related task order and any applicable documentation.
Move approval.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson to approve, second by Alderman Janser. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Motion is approved. 7.2 is repair of roll-off truck. The street department borrows trucks from other departments to ensure large quantities of snow can be moved in a timely manner. During this operation a few weeks ago, a landfill roll-off truck was severely damaged in an accident. Recommendations to council. First recommendation is to approve a budget amendment in the amount of $100,000 from cash reserves to the landfill vehicle maintenance and repair. And 2, authorize Public Works to forego bidding requirements for a purchase over $50,000 and allow a solicitation of quotes to shorten the project timeline. What are the wishes of council?
Move approval.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson to approve. Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Alderman Janser. Discussion on the motion to approve. Any discussion on the motion? Final call for Alderman Janser.
Could we get a little idea of what kind of damage happened or what the accident was?
Look to our Public Works Director for a little bit more information on the incident.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Alderman Janser, when they were hauling snow, the hoist went up and they hit the pedestrian bridge in North Broadway. So it essentially ruined the hook from the roll-off that pulls the tank on. The tank screwed up some of the axles and So there's about $30,000 damage to the truck and 60-some thousand dollar damage just to the hook unit. It's the same hook unit that 5 years ago we bought for $28,000. Now it's a $65,000 item due to demand.
Okay. Thanks, Dan.
Any other questions for our Public Works Director while he's at the podium? Thank you, Dan. Last call for discussion on the motion to approve. Seeing none, the motion is to approve the item with both recommendations. Please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Rodrigula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Motion is approved. 7.3 is the 2023 Safe Route to School project update. The North Dakota Department of Transportation, also known as NDDOT, is requested in light of the recent increases in bid prices due to rising inflation and increasing wage rates that the city updates our engineer estimates for the Bel Air SRTs, Washington SRTs, and they also recommend the city tie the project to bid at the same time. This would move the 2024 Washington SRT projects from 2024 construction to 2023 construction. The single recommendation to the council is to tie the 2023 Bel Air Safe Route to School projects, also known as the SRTs, and the proposed 2024 Washington SRT projects, and move the 24 projects up to 2023.
Move approval.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Pittner. Any discussion on the motion to approve? Alderwoman Olson.
I assume this would be the city engineer that maybe could answer questions.
Good evening again, Lance.
Good evening.
So, thank you. Just a clarification on how this looks. I know actually we've had people in the Washington School area requesting that some of these projects be moved forward. So can you describe the timeline? Does all of this occur in 2023, or are you just bidding them together so we'd understand it better?
Mr. Mayor and Alderwoman Olson, the way that this project would be structured if council passes it tonight, staff will design both of these projects, the Bel Air project and the Washington School project along Hiawatha, in 2022. And then we'd bid those projects together. We call it tying them. So the DOT would take essentially two projects, they'd bid them under one plan set with one contractor in an effort to try to spread out the mobilization and bond costs. Instead of paying for it twice, you just pay for it once. So we're trying to get a better deal on it by combining the projects together essentially. So we'd bid that project then in February 23, and then both projects would be constructed in the 2023 construction season.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for our city engineer at this time? Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome.
And for anyone who is at home or even in the audience, to check the attached PDF shows the city's cost share in this project is 19.07% of total cost. Any other discussion on the motion to approve? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Rodrigula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion is approved. That is the end of section 7. Number 8 on our agenda is personal appearances. This is an opportunity for anyone to come forward and speak on any item that is or is not on our agenda. Would just ask if you do come forward to state your name and city of residence for the record. One more call for personal appearances. Seeing none, that takes us to number 9. 9.1 is the City of Minot recycling discussion. We do have Stefan Clemmen and Bob Anderson with Closed Loop Partners on this, I would believe, perhaps by phone, but we're going to have our Assistant Public Works Director come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. It was a few months ago, we recommended award for the transfer facility, and I made you aware at that point that we were speaking with a group that had reached out to us about the potential for a local sorting facility versus our collect and haul project that we're currently looking at. So we've been in discussions and talks with Closed Loop Partners for the last couple months and talking through some different opportunities. And I thought it was worthwhile for council to hear what Closed Loop has to offer, and see if it garners some further discussion from you all. So, without any delay, I'll turn it over to Bob Anderson, and Stephen Clayman should be on Teams right now. So.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. Is this advance?
And during your presentation, if you would, just pull the microphone down so anybody watching at home can also hear you.
Sure. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to present today. You guys run a very efficient meeting, so we'll keep it brief. I've been in the solid waste, my name's Bob Anderson. I've been in the solid waste industry for over 35 years. The first 20 years was in trash with BFI, a company called BFI. I did some mergers and acquisitions work with them. And then in 2005, I moved to recycling to a company that was called ReCommunity, which was the largest pure play recycling company in the country, 12 years there. I used to tell people that I moved from the dark side to the light when I went to the recycling facility. And then 5 years ago, I joined Closed Loop Partners, which is a very unique organization in the investment world. We've got Stephen Clayman with us this evening as well. When we get to his part of the presentation, I'll allow him to introduce himself rather than kind of disjoint things. Did work. Oh, there we go. So I'm not going to read this rather lengthy disclaimer, but SEC requires that we put the disclaimers in since we are an investment firm. But the interesting thing is, when you made your decision to go to the transfer station, that was pretty much the mindset at the time. And so for the last couple of years, basically the last 2 years, we've been really working on this what we call localized MRF processing. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little bit of overview of who we are at Closed Loop Partners, and then I'll toss it over to Stephen. But we're an investment firm and an innovation center, and we're looking to build the circular economy. And it's just a new economic model on how to handle the resources that we have for a profitable and sustainable future. Today, there's not any real, if you were going to do a recycling facility in America, you'd have a hard time going through traditional investment mechanisms in order to get there. Our founder, a gentleman by the name of our founder and president, Ron Gonen, came up with this idea of investing in a circular economy, moving away from the linear economy, which is take, make, waste, into a circular economy, and using catalytic capital in order to do that. And so the way we accomplish that is we've got 4 asset classes in the Innovation Center. So our venture capital fund, we're basically investing in cutting-edge technologies. We have an investment in a company called Amp Robotics, which is located in Denver, Colorado, where they're automating MRF processing. We've invested in a company called Evernew that is looking to take cloth fabric today, regenerate it into fabric so that we can go from clothing to clothing. A lot of those types of cutting-edge technologies that a lot of your traditional investment firms wouldn't necessarily be interested in. We have a growth equity fund where we're investing in emerging companies that are working in the sustainable supply chain. Our leadership fund is private equity, where we invest in companies. So we've invested in Balcones, which is one of the largest MRF processors in the state of Texas. We recently purchased Sims Municipal Recycling, which has the city of New York's contract, one of the largest MRFs in the country. And we've purchased several facilities down in Florida, one of which is the most technologically advanced single-stream recycling in the country. So when we talk about localized recycling, we talk about it in the context of we don't believe that localized recycling is the only answer. We believe that localized recycling is a tool for some municipalities versus large municipalities where you need a large regional facility. And in our innovation center, we actually bring folks like Starbucks and McDonald's together for the next gen cup challenge, which is to how do we address the problem of disposable cups. So it's a pre-competitive situation where we bring stakeholders together and have them invest resources into finding new solutions. The other program that we have, which you may have heard of, is Beyond the Bag. So all of these disposable single-use bags out there, is there a better way to do it? We brought Target together with Walmart and Walgreens and a couple other very large competitors to try to solve these very challenging problems. We look at the circular economy as a $4.5 trillion opportunity globally. And, you know, right now, consumer packaging sends about $2.6 trillion annually into landfill. So it's a massive problem. It's a massive opportunity. And, you know, we're using economics in order to solve those problems. So we're looking at cost savings, regulation, stability, and consumer demand. So our limited partners include some of the largest corporations in America. We got Amazon, Coca-Cola, Colgate-Palmolive, Keurig, P&G, PepsiCo, Starbucks. So we're bringing these large corporations that want to solve the sustainability problem that we have in America, and we're using our network of investors, our industry experience, and our track record in order to advance the economy, the circular economy. And this presentation will be available to you if you want. I want to keep it brief, and it'll be open for questions if you have more questions. This is an example of some of the investments that we've made. So you'll see, like the city of Phoenix, we invested millions of dollars into their recycling infrastructure there. You'll see a number of municipalities. Two of the companies that I've been intimately involved with were Amp Robotics and Retriever. Retriever is a program to be able to collect clothing and electronics curbside. So today, clothing and electronics is picked up mostly through drop-off centers, and we think that there's an opportunity in order to advance clothing and electronics. Right now, only about 15% of clothing actually gets captured. 85% goes into landfill. So there's these massive opportunities out there, and the firm, we have about $500 million under management. Will probably grow to about $750 million by the end of this year. But again, that's why we have the disclosure statement in the front. We also believe that recycling is local. You know, we must stop treating recyclables the way that we treat waste. I've got a waste background, so you know, we always think about hub and spoke, and we think about taking it to a large regional facility. And, you know, historically, that's something that's made sense because I spent 12 years talking to communities that wanted to recycle locally and telling them, well, look, if you don't have 40 to 50,000 tons a year, there's nothing I can really do for you. Well, now we're rethinking that through Closed Loop, and we're saying, you know what, we think that there's opportunities out there for several thousand tons per year. So the two projects that we have, which will be highlighted by Stephen, are in that lower tier. And so we've been building this process and been talking about it for about 2 years. We have two projects that are underway and successful. So we feel like we've proven our concept. And now is a good time for us to come in and talk with communities like Minot. One of the examples I'd like to give people is when you look at brewing in America. In 1995, there were 192 microbreweries. By 2018, there were over 4,500. And we sit back and say, who would have thought in 1995 that a small brewery could have challenged Anheuser-Busch, of course? It didn't really sound possible. And we think there's similar opportunities for that same type of program in recycling. You know, why can't we recycle locally? And the barriers to that have been, you know, mostly equipment design, and the fact that in order to build a facility, you're $3 to $25 million. And so we've got this system now where for a relatively low CapEx and having the ability to make it modular so that you could grow as your community grows, then it makes a lot more sense. Today, 55% of all processing in America is controlled by the big waste concerns. And so they think about their landfills in the same context of their recycling centers. When you own a landfill, it's a major capital investment. And you've got 30 years plus of non-revenue producing periods where you still have to steward this asset. And so when you sit back and you think about the cash reserves that are needed in order to steward a landfill, you can appreciate the margins that are required in order to make that landfill sustainable and profitable into the future. Those same metrics don't hold true for a recycling facility. You can site a recycling facility, you could run it for 10 years and shut it down, and you have no more liability around that. So the big waste concerns want to sit back and say, I want to have the same margin at my recycling facility as I have in my landfill, and therefore I'm agnostic as to where it goes. It goes to landfill, goes to recycling, it doesn't matter to me, I'm making the same profit margin. And we believe that the way that recycling is being pushed today, it's not sustainable for municipalities. In the Northeast, where I'm from, we've got municipalities that are paying 2-3 times their landfill disposal, paying $150 a ton for their recyclable materials. We don't think that's sustainable. So we came up with the concept to say, can we build a localized MRF designed to empower communities and independent haulers? And we think we've done that. And we offer a program that empowers communities. So when I talk to a community like Monmouth, they go, well, I've never sold recyclable materials. I don't know what to do with them. Well, those are the types of things where we walk in with a blank slate and say, okay, what expertise do you need? We have them all. And the idea is that we build this ecosystem of small MRFs that we can pull together, and everybody, you're getting on the same level playing field as all the large concerns because you're selling your smaller commodities at the same volume that a large waste concern would be doing. So we would be taking the recyclable materials from Minot, bundling it up with all the other recyclables that we're moving, and putting everybody on a level playing field from a commodity value standpoint. And then we've got convenings where we can use best practices. If the city were to run the facility or you request we run the facility, that we would have those best practices so you wouldn't have to recreate the wheel. So it's an entire program. We're not really selling equipment as much as we're selling a concept and a solution to empower the city of Minot in order to control their own destiny when it comes to recyclables. Stephen, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Bob. Can you folks hear me okay?
We can hear you just fine. Please go ahead.
All right. Thank you. I will. All right. So, great. Thanks, Bob. What you're looking at is the localized recycling infrastructure that we're proposing to the city of Minot. We've had some great discussions with Mr. Sorensen from the DPW department. The program that we can implement there would be a great opportunity for the city of Minot is a tailored production facility to process the recyclables that you're going to engage in collecting at the curb, I believe, in 2023. The system that we could implement is very small in its structure, very amicable for financial means for implementation. It can process up to 5,000 tons per year, anywhere from 4,000 to 5,000 tons per year. So more than enough aptitude to handle the materials that you guys would collect. It's a unique design in the building infrastructure that you're engaged in currently. It would fit within that platform. It's a unique design where it's agnostic to the materials that are going to be collected with your program, whether it's dual stream, single stream. I mean, heck, you could even put clothing through this and sort it out into different compartments that you wanted to do. But for this sake, we're talking recyclables. So your cardboard, your paper, your plastics, your tin, your aluminum, would all get sorted in the system.
Hey, Stephen, if I could,
Size, it definitely fit in with the facility that you're at.
Stephen, I don't want to break your cadence, but you want to give yourself a little introduction, so, council?
Yeah, I was going to do that at the end, just
Okay.
in the spirit of time, but I can do that first. So my name's Stephen Clayman. I've been in the industry for 27 plus years. If you talk to Mr. Sorensen, he might refer me as SK. A lot of folks in the industry call me SK. I grew up on the back of a garbage truck and never looked back. I've been around recycling plants, landfills, logistics, collections, but in the last, 15 plus years, it's all been recycling facilities, developing, operating, and supporting the build outs of them. I've worked for many years with Bob in the past, and that's a little bit about me, but I've worked for Closed Loop Partners for the last 6 months. Prior to that, I was with Recommunity, as Bob stated, along with a couple other larger companies, Casella Waste Systems and Republic Services. So thanks for having us. I really appreciate it. Okay, a couple case studies just for viability's sake. I'll talk to you about two of them real quick here. The Authority is a facility down in Cumberland County, New Jersey, where they have a landfill. They have a footprint there that has a landfill, gas to energy, leachate recovery system, natural gas filling station. One thing they were missing was, hey, we don't have a recycling facility. We're not processing our own volume. We're trucking the volume out. We want to have our own facility. We want to control what we do with our recyclables, and we want to process that locally. So that's exactly what they did. At that facility, we have 12,000 square foot building. We are expanding it out to 4,000 additional square feet so that we have 16,000 square feet. They process a lot more volume. They're doing roughly 1,300, 1,400 tons per month. It's a full scale. The picture that you're seeing right there, that's the Revolution. That's the small balers. As they process material, it's dropped down through a chute. It automatically goes into a baler. So you're not dumping the material into a bunker and then baling it and when the bunkers are full. So it's on-demand baling. The system in Cumberland County is for the larger volume. So they also have an OCC screen, fiber screen that takes out all the newspaper and some other QC stations. It's a paradigm shift for them, just based on the size of the facility. Now, when I talk about the size, it's not something where they invested $10 to $15 million. They invested less than $3 million, between that $2.5 and $3 million range. The system that they take great pride in, they don't do as many miles as what you guys are looking at. They were only trucking their recyclables 50 miles each way, roughly. And just by putting in their own processing system, again, they're doing a mini MRF infrastructure. It's not a concept. It's actually, they're doing it. And we implemented that for them. They eliminated over 1 million truck miles over the course of the contract for 10 years. And they wanted to do this just because they didn't want to truck the stuff 50 miles to a larger MRF. LRS is it's a major stakeholder in the market throughout the U.S. They're a very large company. They have some very large recycling facilities throughout the country where they actually sit there and say, all right, we're doing 50,000 tons a year, 100,000 tons a year. They have plants out there that cost them anywhere from 10 to $15 million. They're even talking about building another larger one, which they're not talking about it. They're going to do it. It's going to cost them in excess of $15 million, somewhere up near 20 plus. So very large company. Why we're bringing this up. That picture you're seeing is the Revolution again. That's exactly what you would see in your facility. And notice the comparison of the height of the people and the size of that machine. That's all it is. It's going to fit over in the corner of your building. You dump the material in that infeed on the left, takes it up top, sort it out, down into the balers like I was talking about before. So why do I bring this up when this company has large facilities in Chicago when they can just put something in larger. They're up, as you see, they're up near DeForest, Wisconsin, right near Madison. They chose to do this because they didn't want to truck it all the way back down to Chicagoland. They chose that they wanted to localize the processing and control the recyclables right then and there, and in conjunction with the city and local partners there. So Lakeshore, is, with the system that they're doing, this is their system again. Again, this is a great view of just how this sits in the corner of the building. And they're doing upwards of 4,000 tons a year. Right now, I think talking with Mr. Sorensen, you guys are spec'd out where you come out of the gate, you'd be roughly about 2,400 tons a year, where you could have the aptitude to go up to 4,000 tons. This system can handle all that. It's scaled to match their volume. If they needed to, if they started getting more volume, the great feature about this system is you can add on to it. So. But again, the point is they're a very large corporation using the mini MRF concept to control what they're doing in that local market. So what does this mean for the city of Minot that is engaged in a transfer station option? You could convert to localized processing solution, just working with Bob Anderson and myself. Some of the great highlights of this is Minot would have the first single stream processing in North Dakota, creating a fully integrated waste complex like the authority that I talked about earlier in New Jersey. And you guys already have the landfill, and it's a regional landfill facility. Why not have the first single stream facility processing, and you perhaps have other communities be a part of that? But right now we're just focused on what you guys are doing and what we can help you with. You'd eliminate over 1,000 miles round trip by having a localized MRF. A material recovery facility. That's a big number. The trucking on that is just staggering. And with the fuel costs that are skyrocketing, you can't control the fuel, but you can control what you're processing as a local community. You'd create local jobs with having this small facility. The amount of volume you have in the size of this facility, you'd need roughly 6 people to run this facility. You'd maintain full control of the recycling program and what you put through that system and what you want to recycle. If you want to recycle just 1s and 2 plastics, you can do that. If you want to add in 3 through 7 plastics as well, there's bunkers, and or not bunkers, but there's chutes, and you can add in balers for that. There's definitely growth opportunity to expand onto the Revolution and make it a larger facility so that you can process additional volumes. Just a keynote earlier, I talked about how the authority in New Jersey is going to eliminate 1 million miles over the course of 10 years. You guys would eliminate 1.3 million miles over the course of 10 years, or you'd eliminate 133,000 truck miles in just 1 year. Based off of 2,400 tons per year at 18 tons per load. That's a staggering number, and it'd be a great benefit of localized processing compared to transferring it. So the favorable economics that we are seeing, me and Bob just pulling together some numbers that we have. Localized processing compared to transferring penciled out to near break even in unfavorable markets and profitable in favorable markets. Currently, and in the past couple of years, we've been in favorable markets. So you would have some profitable numbers just processing locally versus transporting off. And simply for CapEx, for the processing equipment alone, just the equipment for processing is just shy of $1 million. We took a look at, with your team from DPW, where you guys were proposing to put in the transfer station, and said, look, we understand you want to have some office space and some other opportunities for, I think it's household hazardous waste. So it's going to eat up part of that 10,000 square foot building, which leaves roughly 7,500 square feet. So really, you'd want to be right around that 10,000 to 12,000 square foot mark for the size of your material. So you would need to expand out just slightly 2,000 to 4,000 square feet for a tip floor. just to hold the material so that you could process it, maneuver in there, and have your baled commodity stored inside so then you can ship it outbound and then take advantage of the rebates that you'd get from the baled material going out to a mill. These were just a couple of options that we just were pegging out. These aren't fixed. Obviously nobody made any decisions on this. These are just some ideas that we're proposing, just to say, hey, you can make this work. The green square where we were saying expand looks like where it was going to be a future building expansion anyways. So the property and the site is what we're going to here is you can fit it and it can work. The base system layout, just for all those that just want to see an overhead view of it, basically that's it. It's an in-feed. It's a circular design, and roughly you'd have 4 sorters up there sorting out the material and throwing it into chutes that go down in direct bale. Very basic system. It's not convoluted with conveyors going all over the place. Again, what you're looking at right here with the balers, the in-feed, you're looking at that price point of what I was talking about is $1 million or less, versus I think when you guys were looking at stuff to handle your 2,400 to 4,000 tons per year was coming in pegged from other companies at over $3 million. And then if you got up even higher with volume, 12 million. But if you take a step back and recall what I was talking about in New Jersey, should you jump out to a regional MRF, Bob, can you jump to the next one? And one more. If you jumped into the system, that's what a larger one would look like. It's really not taking up that much space. That system you're looking at right now takes up a 12,000 square foot building. That's it, folks. And it's the one that I referenced that was less than $3 million. It's coming in right around 2.5. And that is handling roughly 15,000 tons per year of volume, which you guys, I don't believe we'll get to, but the point is we can make all this happen for whatever volumes you guys have for price points that are far, far less than what was presented to you a few years ago. We've come up with the localized MRF processing infrastructure, and we are so excited as a company to offer this out and to help communities and private haulers engage and move forward in this, and take control of what you're doing with your recyclables and be accretive to the financials that would come back to you in rebates.
So just a few final points in closing, and thank you, Stephen. One of the things that the In the Round Revolution does for us is when you have a smaller crew, there's actually a mechanism that can be lifted so that material can continue to circulate if you're not collecting everything on the first pass. And we have you doing about 1.5, 1 3/4 ton an hour. In order to do that, you could do some additional processing if folks weren't able to capture everything on the first pass. The other thing that I would say is that based on your timeline of wanting to start your program by June of 2023, we could absolutely keep you on that timeline or keep you close to that timeline. So it's not going to delay your project. And so today's presentation was basically, we wanted to bring you up to speed, and we wanted to see if you thought there was value in us in continuing this conversation and, getting to a point where does it make sense to consider this farther, or, have you already made your decision to do something different? So all we're asking for from council tonight is to take it under consideration. And if it's something that you want to continue to pursue, we'd be happy to continue our conversations with your staff and advance this very cutting-edge idea. So we thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, certainly reach out to us, or you can certainly ask questions now.
Thank you, Mr. Anders, and thank you to Mr. Clayman for the presentation. Just a couple of quick questions for me, and then I'll turn it to anybody else that wants to. In terms of the bales, how are they moving, where are they moving, and what does the market look like for those recyclables right now?
So right now, the markets are very favorable. When you look at the price of a barrel of oil, that means your plastic grades start to go up. And so we've got some real favorable pricing right now. Our concept for localized MRF processing is, can we find local outlets for these materials? You know, are there local opportunities? Currently in our projects, we're using the traditional markets where we're sending some in export. We're trying to keep as much as possible domestically, but we also believe that there are local industries that might be able to use these byproducts, and ultimately we want to try to seek those out. But right now, the commodity markets are very favorable.
Are there any markets regionally, and how do they get there?
So they would go by truck. We would bale the materials. And so the way we think about the truck traffic is the commodities out of Minot are probably not going to travel all that much farther than they will from your end processor that's 500 miles away. So we kind of think about it and compartmentalize it by saying, we think that the transportation to the market is going to be about equivalent. And then so really where the pickup is losing that freight from Minot to a processor.
One last question from me, and that is, after touring one of the MRFs over in Oslo, Norway, one of their biggest issues was O&M from people putting stuff that's not recyclable into the system, and then having to deal with the O&M costs. With a system like this, is there a prevention method, or what would a cost look like in that regard?
So, you know, the system is not overly complicated. So in order for materials to damage this equipment would be a lot more challenging than if you're going through, say, robotics, or if you're going through optical sorts or some of the automated processing. That's where your pre-sort becomes really important, because if you're going through disc screens, you get your plastic bags that get wrapped around the shafts. Reality is that you have an awesome opportunity here because you're going to be messaging from day one. So as long as your messaging and education out of the gate is strong and you maintain it, then you're not going to lose that quality of material. So on the East Coast where I'm from, we've been recycling since the 80s. And the messaging has been spotty because the message changes a lot. And so we've got residue rates in the East Coast that can be, you know, the best ones today are maybe 10, 15%, and the worst ones are probably 30 to 40%. And so I think one of the things that's really important, no matter how you move forward, is make sure that you invest in your education program and you maintain that education program. Because I think people want to do the right thing, but there's this thing called wish recycling, which is, man, if I just put this in my recycling bin, they're going to figure out a way to recycle it. And what I tell people is, when you put a non-recyclable into your recycling bin, all that does is increase the carbon footprint, because rather than going from your house to landfill, it goes from your house to recycling center, and then we waste all of these resources processing it only to put it in landfill anyway. So because this equipment isn't sophisticated, we don't really envision a time where non-recyclable materials are going to damage the system.
Thank you, Mr. Enders. Any other questions? Sorry, Mr. Clayman?
Yes. It's a great point, great question too. One of the features about this system that would be put in is the infeed belt is steel. It's not a rubber belt. And then the deck, the Revolution deck, the circular piece that I was showing you earlier, that is a hard ox steel. So it's not a rubber belting feature where you're going to have a lot of belt tears. And like Bob said, there's not a lot of sophisticated technology that's going to really get jammed up with items that don't belong. So it's a huge positive. It's a great question, and that's a great point that these items, this is almost going to be bulletproof. Won't be, but it's more reliable than the systems maybe where you saw where there's a lot of rubber belting and a lot of technology that can get damaged. Thanks.
Thank you. Alderwoman Evans.
So the current equipment, tell me what materials is it capable of recycling?
Well, so we can do dual stream or single stream. Dual stream is where fiber and is separate than your bottles and cans. It can sort up to 10 commodities. So you could get super granular with what you want to recycle, or you could take a position where you're going to keep it real conservative, stick with the commodities that you know are going to be strong going into the future. We understand you're really not interested in moving into glass, which glass is very abrasive with equipment. So it's a sound decision to consider not including glass. A lot of programs do include glass. So it's the type of system where you can pretty much, we can set it up for however the number of commodities that you're looking to harvest out of the stream.
And then can you modify along the way? Like, let's say in 5 years, we did want to do glass. We'd be able to tweak the equipment?
Yeah, that's the modular aspect of it is, you can tack stuff on as you decide to move in that direction.
That's it.
Other questions?
Can I jump in there?
Mr. Klayman, please go ahead.
Yeah, great. So that's another great question. So right now, if you guys just kept to like cardboard, newspaper, milk jugs, pigmented plastic, like your laundry detergent bottles, the number 2 plastics, PET, number 1 bottles, aluminum and tin, that's 7 commodities that you would sort. This has 10 chutes. So you could add 3 more if you wanted down the road. Thank you.
Yeah, you could actually expand beyond that because I think in our initial analysis, we included an eddy current and belt magnet, which would mean that you wouldn't be picking the aluminum cans and the metal. That would be an automated process.
So room to grow.
Other questions? Alderman Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Anderson, if you can talk a little bit about, I heard New Jersey and I heard Chicago. This is mine in North Dakota. We're a ways away, and I understand the trucking concept of it, but have you worked with communities our size before? Is there a project that you can reference or?
Steamboat Springs, Colorado. So the Revolution Company is actually out of Boulder, Colorado. Steamboat Springs is not our project. It's the project of Revolution. But the entire system was designed with a Minot involved in mind. This is why we went down this road. This Minot is the reason. The Minots of America is the reason why we're advancing this system.
Thank you.
One of the things that I just would add one additional point is I like to say that I almost feel like it's going back to the future. Like in the early days of recycling, many, many communities had their own recycling facilities. And like a lot of things, we went through this consolidation stage. And the consolidation stage made sense at the time because there wasn't a consolidation of all the processing. Now that there's a consolidation of processing, there's just not a tremendous amount of competition when it comes to recycle processing across America. So a lot of communities find themselves at the mercy of whoever is their processor. And so the firm has really looked at going in this direction in order to inject another form of competition, because if a processor feels like this city has no choice, I can pick my price, that's not a real good position for a lot of cities to be in. So we sit back and say, even if we just change the dynamic for some communities by injecting the fear of competition, that'll be a win for us. The firm itself, which I didn't mention, is the last fund that we started with, our growth fund, is actually zero-cost financing for municipalities and below market rate for private companies. And so our limited partners, Walmart, Amazon, these large companies, they give us, say, $50 million, and all they want is their money back. So it's not a situation where they're looking for a return on that money. And then we, in turn, take that capital and catalyze it in communities in order to advance recycling. We haven't really talked much about it, but we do have, there was recently announced a Pepsi fund where they invested $35 million for localized processing. There's some caveats that go along with that funding, but there is funding available in order to help support a decision to go into a localized recycling.
Just want to
Continue.
just to follow up. So going with our past model or our past structure, we would just ship it to a single processor. Now what you're saying is we would be having to kind of build a relationship with 5 or 6, 7, 8, 10 end users instead of going to a processor.
Well, what you become the processor, or we become the depending on, and then those commodities get sold, and that's another aspect of the value chain that we can help support. So yeah, there's 7 commodities. There's 7. Well, it could be 14 people that we're selling to, because you might have 2 buyers for every commodity.
So does that fall on your team, or will that fall on the responsibility of our city mine staff?
That's where we have the blank sheet, which says, we can support you, we can do it. We're coming in with a blank sheet and saying, what do you want to own? And what do you want help with, or what would you want us to own? In the case of Cumberland, we did the design, we did the build, we're running it, and we're selling all the commodities. They control the gate, and they take care of all the residue and glass out of the facility, and they give us a building at $1 a year. And so that's why we come into the community with no preconceived notions. What are the needs of Minot, and how can we potentially help and make this project successful without any preconceived notion to say, well, we need to own this, this, and this. We can teach you to sell your own, or we can sell for you.
Thank you.
Further questions? Alderman Patagula.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued by this. I guess what I'm struggling with is that what we've always been told, or at least what I've assumed, is really being questioned here. We've always been told that we just don't have the volume. I guess the 3 objections, as I recall them, are that we don't have the volume. It's not in Chicago or someplace. The second objection or problem is that the worldwide markets are bad, which now we learned from Jason isn't quite so true anymore. And the third objection,
cyclical.
Right. And the third objection or problem has been that we're just so far away from people who would use this, who would purchase recyclables and then use them. It seems like your model, which you're proposing, really kind of negates those. And I guess I'm wondering, how come there's a successful thing out there that kind of runs contrary to common or wisdom or common
Yeah,
belief?
I mean, we're really, thank you for the question, but I mean, that's what the firm is all about, is how do we break the current model? Where do we find those paradigm shifts?
Right.
And can it be done a different way? We argue that trash people have been running recycling for the last 20 years. And so everybody thinks in the mindset of how do we pick material up with trash trucks? How do we pack it? How do we get the highest amount of volume and transport the most that we can? And so even with this, we think about can we break the transportation model as well? Because one of the reasons you use high compaction vehicles is in order to not sit in line at a recycling facility somewhere. So, there are alternative collection models, again, going back to the future, where in a small community, maybe it's their dump truck with a trailer behind it, because we used to run those systems, or it's a non-compartmentalized vehicle, or a non-compaction vehicle, or are there other collection mechanisms that could potentially save money? I think the direction that your public works is headed now with the automated collection is from standpoint efficiency and safety and everything. It's, we wouldn't challenge that. We wouldn't necessarily want to rethink that unless that's something that your public works wanted to do. But when we think about how systems should be structured, we're kind of breaking down all the norms and saying what's really going to be the most successful for a smaller community. And part of the reason people overlook the small communities is because these big equipment manufacturers, they would rather sell a $20 million facility than $20 million facilities, because it's a lot of work. We think the time now, though, is open to look at it.
Any follow-up questions, Alderman Padagula?
Yeah, so if I get the thrust of what you're saying right, what you're saying is that you're going to be looking at this in a different way, and that by sorting the stuff early, right away, and compacting it into dense clumps of things, it's easier and cheaper to transport and sell to people at distances. And if we do it ourselves and we keep things simple and cheap, we overcome some of the previous barriers. Is that it, basically?
Yes, in a nutshell. The only differentiator, or the way that I think about it, is if you've got processor A that's 500 miles away and you've got your local facility and it costs the same amount per ton to process it both, you've just eliminated that trip.
Right.
And then if all else is equal, and even if you're getting a little bit less for the commodities because of your proximity to the markets, then we just need to do the math to make sure that everything works before you actually pull the trigger.
Right, because that's been one of the things that seems so odd. If we, pick up stuff here and then we ship it 500 miles to Minneapolis, I mean, that seems so efficient and seems to go just against the whole ethos of recycling. We're incurring tremendous transportation costs and fuel costs. And you're saying that, we're basically shipping, well, in a way, this is value-added agriculture. This is value-added garbage, value-added recyclables. Is that a good way of looking at it?
Yes.
Okay, now I understand. Thank you.
Yep. Other questions at this time? Alderwoman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I would just have a comment. I mean, I am very intrigued by what we've been told this evening. It's taken us a really, really long time to get to recycling, and maybe this was the reason why. Maybe we needed to think about it differently. Obviously, we have a lot more questions and a lot more information that we have to gather before we can make a final decision, but I guess personally, I would encourage further conversation and get more information.
One of the questions I know that will undoubtedly be asked is to the end user, meaning the person who pays their utility bill to the Public Works Department for sanitation, is, does this cost more or does it cost less than what was previously proposed? I don't expect that answer tonight, but that's an answer that will be asked.
Yeah, I'm on a very high level from our cursory analysis, because we didn't want to come in and waste anybody's time. The answer that we've reached at this point is that it would be more favorable to the taxpayer.
Okay.
I don't have a question, but we don't need a motion, but can we just direct city staff to continue these conversations?
Mr. Sorensen.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think the objective was for you guys to make a decision that we're going to completely change direction, but I wanted you guys to hear this information because it's very different from what we've been talking about for the last, I guess it's been since about 2016, I think, when we started this, and it's taken us a long time to get to this point. But if you remember, this was one of the questions, like, if we're going to spend all this money on trucking, can we spend that money on local jobs or some sort of a local processing, which led us down. We did a feasibility study and we looked at different size MRFs and whether or not that was possible. And while yes, it was possible, they were just too large at that time, where they weren't really scalable for the smaller amounts of waste that we're dealing with. So I wanted to make sure that you guys were aware that this is something that was, newer in the industry. It's definitely relatable to a community our size. And yeah, by all means, we can certainly look into this a little further. do a little comparison on costs between their program and our program and bring some of that back in a couple weeks.
Thank you.
My
Continue.
only caveat is like, I still want us on the summer 2023 timeline, and it sounds like that's completely possible.
That's certainly been my concern as well, is, if we decide that, yes, we want to go this route, that we have rules and regulations for bidding and procurement, so there'd have to be, probably a process or some sort of a RFP or something. So we'd have to go through that process, evaluate, select, and then, but when you talk to them about the timeline of procurement for their equipment, it's very similar to our steel building.
Yep.
So maybe instead of a June implementation, maybe it's a September implementation or something like that. But I'm definitely striving, I want to keep this on the track of a 2023 implementation for sure.
Thank you. I have probably sheets of questions that I will go back to and email those out after this. So I would certainly encourage the council, as well as folks out in the listening specter of this, to also send those questions that they have. So thank you, Mr. Sorensen.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have moved then into our last section, unless there are any other miscellaneous and discussion items. Actually, there is one that I do want to just briefly highlight. There has been discussions, Alderwoman Evans did also bring this to the attention of the city manager and myself. In the past, there really has not been any significant city recognition or community recognition for some of our great high school folks that have done spectacular things at state tournaments and academics and extracurricular activities. City manager and I plan to bring to the council for consideration at least some sort of idea on what that could look like here in probably the next 20 to 30 days for council to consider. Outside of that, it's liaison reports. Alderman Patagula.
Thank you. Let's see here. The County Planning Commission, in which I serve with Carrie, has been continuing to be fairly productive, and we're moving ahead with strategizing, reorganizing the county planning process and the maps and what goes in the various zones and stuff. So that continues to be a little bit better. In terms of the Minot Commission on Aging, things are going fairly smoothly there just by way of education. They provide approximately 325 delivered meals in Minot itself and about 125 delivered meals in neighboring communities. Each meal costs a little bit over $11 to produce, and they're paid for by various grants and programs. And they really are very important in keeping individuals in their homes, keeping them well nourished, and also having some social contact for them and somebody checking in on them. One of our volunteers at this last meeting pointed out that one woman she's delivered to for years just was not able to get out of bed one morning, and it was going to be prompting a call to relatives to let them know that her condition may be deteriorating and some out-of-home placement might be necessary. So it's that kind of caring, almost loving kind of attention that many of the volunteers show. Many of them are long-term and have established relationships with the people they deliver to. So this really is an unsung, but I think very important program in the community, and I'm glad that the newspaper had an article about it. I think it was this morning or last morning. So the more I serve on that board, the more I realize how important small gestures like that are in improving the quality of life for a significant number of people in our community. In terms of the Area Resource Council in which I serve, we had a productive meeting. The police department SWAT team presented on their resources and what they bring to bear on an emergency situation, and I continue to be impressed with their very focused, very conservative, non-Rambo, non-Hulk kind of intervention. As a forensic psychologist, that really is the way to go, and I think this is important that people understand, because there's so much negative publicity about police agencies and police officers using excessive force or great deal of force or just charging into situations with guns blazing, and that's not how we do it here, and that makes me feel very good. I also participated as part of that meeting in an hour-long tabletop exercise of a hypothetical active shooter at the Ward County Courthouse, and it was very interesting to see all the different problems and issues that people were able to identify when there were 20 or 30 of them sitting around a table talking at length about how they might handle the situation. We identified various shortcomings in terms of procedures and physical facilities and brainstormed solutions. So that was a very positive activity to be involved in, and it's heartening to see so many different agencies, I think spearheaded by our city police and fire and central dispatch, working together, collaborating on protecting us and keeping us safe in the face of potential awful things. So it's been a good month.
Thank you, Alderman Potterville. Any questions? Alderwoman Olson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have not attended any standing committee meetings. However, I did represent City Council at a document review team meeting with city staff. They are looking at the plans for Minot's newest high school, and with the need for a zone change, they did need to have someone from City Council there, so I did attend that meeting. And also, along with other city staff, I met with staff from Souris Basin Planning Council, who will be bringing a request to the Magic Fund Steering Committee, which, with their recommendations, should come before us in the next couple of months.
Any questions for Alderwoman Olson? Alderwoman Evans.
Nothing out of the ordinary to note for library and Ward County Planning. I am serving on the Pavement Management Plan Committee. Very exciting. Tomorrow we spend the afternoon interviewing potential consultants for help on that project.
All right. Any questions for Alderwoman Evans? I will leave the majority of mine for the mayor's report, but this morning did meet as part of the Ward County Weed Board. Of course, many of the concerns, or I think questions that are moving forward, are with the rising fuel costs and costs for chemical and things like that. Taking a close look at the budget and how that's going to be impacting this next summer. I'm sure something that all of our departments as well will also be taking into consideration as we work through this current budget and then also plan for next year's budget. Outside of that, I will just leave the rest of my report to our next meeting. If there are no questions, I would look to Alderman Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The land ordinance update was on tonight's agenda. Zoning Ordinance Steering Committee is scheduled to meet on March 30th. And just as a side note on the recognizing the student athletes, I would encourage to have Carrie on that in those discussions on developing something, since she's the one who initiated the email. So I would hope you guys would. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Ross. It will actually be coming to the full council just for full and final input on that. Alderman Janser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have no meetings to report on this time.
Okay. Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mayor. Visit Minot Board, nothing to note there, just working through some great things. Renaissance Review Board was canceled last week due to lack of actionable items. And the final thing, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a very happy birthday to my eldest son, Holland, who turns 5 today. Holland will be home soon, so I know he's watching, and I would be in trouble if I didn't say it. So that's it.
Any questions for Alderman Pittner? All right, that is the end of our liaison reports. That takes us to our final item, and that is adjournment.
So moved.
Motion by Alderman Ross, second by Alderman Pittner. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. We're adjourned.